Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the well-deserved reward of 2021. It is the VK2801 with the 105mm. Maybe some of you have wondered, what is QuickyBaby's highest experience of all time in World of Tanks? And it was many years ago in the VK2801, back when it used to have the 105mm. 3,276 experience in a single game of World of Tanks. Yeah, that one was pretty meaty. Alas, the VK2801, when it used to be at tier 5 and meeting tier 10 tanks on the enemy team, is no longer a reality. It's now at tier 6, but a few years ago, Wargaming decided to strip the VK2801 of its 105mm gun, so now your only option is to use a paltry 75mm gun on this tank. Luckily, if you've been playing World of Tanks for I think about 3 or 4 years, you will be gifted one of these tanks either today or in the next few days. This vehicle's currently under NDA and I don't know exactly when the well-deserved reward will be delivered, but all you really need to know is that at least I'm ecstatic to be able to get my good old 105mm VK2801 back. So before we get stuck into the gameplay and see if the VK2801 with the 105mm can shine like it used to, let's compare it to the current VK2801 and also two of the most common tier 6 light tanks, the T52 and also the Type 64. So immediately you'll notice this vehicle has a staggering damage per minute of 2,333, way higher than the Type 64. Yeah, the only problem is you're only going to have 64mm of penetration if you want to try and make that damage per minute shine. Realistically, in the VK2801, a lot of players are going to have to dab the 2 key and have 104mm of high explosive anti-tank to be able to achieve that kind of damage per minute. But be warned, these shells are not cheap. They cost 4,000 credits a shot, and so that's a quick way to be able to run out of credits if you're playing this tank very often. Don't think even for a moment that the VK2801 is going to be able to spam gold at decent distances like the Type 64 can against its opponents. What this vehicle is designed to do is to be kind of like an opportunist, try and snipe at something or hit them in the side or the rear, maybe even ram a light tank, and it's meant to be about ambush alpha damage. And with good use of the high explosive rounds on this vehicle, if you can manage to find tanks that are soft enough to be able to pummel, you can do 410 damage with a single shot on a tier 6 light tank. Okay, so now that we know that this thing's got the biggest gun, it should be really no surprise to also realize that its shells take a very long time to be able to travel towards their target. Your high explosive rounds have got 470 meters a second shell velocity, your high explosive anti-tank rounds have got 376, and your armor piercing are up to 470 as well. So be warned, the target better be stationary, otherwise it's nigh on impossible to be able to hit them at a decent distance. One thing I do like about this tank, however, is it carries 42 105mm shells, and that is more than enough to be able to last the entire battle and to take a wide selection of all 3 kinds of ammunition in your tank, so you can choose to use the best one. Alright, so onto the gun handling. Not such good news for this vehicle. 2.3 seconds aim time, 0.55 accuracy, which is absolutely horrendous, and worst dispersion statistics in every single stat, and way worse turret dispersion than the regular VK2801, and yeah, it's looking a little glum for this tank. However, one thing that isn't looking glum for this tank is gun depression. 10 degrees of gun depression and a derp is just so darn troll, and I've had fun with my time in this vehicle once again, working a ridgeline and really surprising my opponents. So the mobility of this vehicle is nothing really to get excited about. 64 kilometers an hour forwards and 22 kilometers an hour backwards. That's really not nearly as good as the Type 64. However, this vehicle has a very impressive power to weight ratio of over 26, meaning that you're very often going to be getting up to that top speed frequently. And as long as you don't expect to be bombing it around like the T52 can, you're going to be very happy with the mobility of the VK2801. Alright, so now let's talk about the armor of this vehicle, and it's an interesting one because the VK2801 kind of has armor, unlike other tier 6 light tanks. Now look, it's not exactly going to stop a Cromwell from slamming you, but if you want to be able to bounce a high explosive round, it's got 50mm of frontal protection. I'm expecting that the day that this releases, that all the matchmaker is going to be filled with is going to be VK VK2801s. And my tip for you is that if you think that you're going to be able to fire high explosive rounds and even do reasonable amount of damage to the enemy VK, yeah, good luck to you. Unless you get flush on the side, you're not going to be penetrating those HE rounds, and make sure you keep your thick part of your tank towards your opponents in those situations. You're best to actually fire armor-piercing rounds and shoot at the side of the VK2801 because it's only got 30mm of armor, and remember your 105mm will be able to overmatch that part of the tank. Or alternatively, you can just spend 4,000 credits per shot and pretty much turn the tank into an XP pinata. Still, the armor on the VK is worth mentioning. It's not incredible, but it can take a high explosive round, unlike a lot of other tanks at its tier. A passing mention should be made to the vehicle's 680 hit points, and I'm kind of surprised at how good the camo rating is on this vehicle, 14.25 on the move and when stationary, which puts it a little bit behind the Type 64 and the T52, but not so much considering how much of a large vehicle it is. So this vehicle gets the same amount of view range as its standard counterpart at 380. That means you really are going to have to take coated optics on this tank unless you have the best crew and you're willing to use a premium consumable. And it's definitely one of the annoyances of the vehicle that unlike the Type 64, which can kind of get away without coated optics, this one's definitely going to have to use them. So how personally would I set up the VK2801? Well, firstly, you've got a bit of a conundrum with the kind of crew that you're going to have. I don't know about you, but I don't really have a very good crew in my regular VK2801, so I've taken my crew from the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen at tier 10, but be warned that your commander's situational awareness isn't going to work, and very few German tanks actually have a dedicated radio operator, but the VK2801 is one of those vehicles. And so if any of you out there love playing the Lux, then this is going to be the perfect tank for you, because you can put your Lux radio operator in this vehicle. I've combined that with my loader from the IU-251, and suddenly this tank is starting to look a little bit chipper. I would thoroughly recommend that you consider investing into intuition on this tank. Trust me, the 3 different flavors of rounds that this vehicle has, you need to be able to switch to them quickly. And I can manage to get my reload down from 7.88 or 83 seconds with the build that you see here down to about 1.5 seconds to be able to switch shells, and that can be wonderful for when you can no longer penetrate an armor piercing round and you need that high explosive anti-tank round, or alternatively the enemy's given you their real weak point and you can pen with the high explosive rounds. Equipment wise on this tank, I'm going to be using a Bounty exhaust system, although you could use a regular exhaust system and put it in the vision slot if you wanted, and I'm going to be combining that with Bounty optics, but use regular optics and regular vents or Bounty vents, whatever you got hanging around. This will allow you to get the camo rating of the vehicle up to a healthy point, 40. And that's because this is a rather large and very easy tank to be able to hit. And so you want to remain hidden for as long as you possibly can to be able to make it into the dip, or just to be able to spot your opponents without hemorrhaging your hit points, that this vehicle will definitely do because of its horrendous profile. There are some downsides to this build, however, like not using vertical stabilizers or not even using the improved aiming device, which could fix or at least help the vehicle's really bad accuracy. But in my opinion, if you're sniping in this tank, you're doing it wrong. It's all about close quarters combat. So here we go. This was my first ever game in the VK2801 with the 105mm, and I was chuffed to have my boy back. Maybe it's me just reminiscing about a time when World of Tanks was arguably a little less serious and a little bit more fun. It is a real good throwback to get into an equally less serious and arguably a little bit more fun tank. The VK2801 has enough engine power in the tank there to race up the slope, and we've got a high explosive round loaded. Oh dear, Mr. Cromwell. Don't worry, I'm just trying to deal with this little light tank there. And you can see that even though our HE round doesn't pen, it could have against the A46, we still do an impressive 240 damage. That is still 2/3 of the damage that our gold round would have done that we just fired into the Cromwell Berlin. Interesting moment there, actually. Even though the Cromwell disappeared and we didn't see the damage, it must have been a split second before, because we can actually see that we dealt 374 damage to the Cromwell Berlin with the high explosive anti-tank round. Now we're just using the camera rating of this vehicle to be able to pop round the corner. I'm not sure if I'm spotted or if that's somebody behind me getting shot at. And I'm trying to... It's like I'm playing golf right now when I'm trying to shoot at this VK3601H. This vehicle is really not a sniper, and being in this kind of a situation is never really going to help out. But oh, I tell you what's never going to help. That Cromwell Berlin getting out-traded by a light tank. Albeit I am spending 4,000 credits a shot to be able to deal that 350 damage. And that puts me right up there at now 1,000 damage dealt against the enemy team. I'd like to clarify that soon I'm about to make a real big mistake. And that is that I haven't moved my high explosive rounds from my 3 key to my 1 key. Another mistake on the enemy team there. The A46 just, I guess, got out scouted. Unfortunate for them. Maybe they don't have a really good crew or all of the equipment that I have on this tank. Oh well. Try and set the vehicle up however you think is going to work, but this was the most fun that I was able to have in this tank. Screw playing this tank as a long-range sniper. Don't try and fix the accuracy, at least in my opinion. Just get to a stage where the accuracy doesn't matter, i.e. seeing the whites of the eyes of your opponents. And then it's all just about this big gun. Drat. We actually managed to hit the frontal armor of the Thunderbolt, which is not too bad. And that means that he's able to ricochet. Really wish I'd been able to hit the side of the tank there. And here's the mistake. Look at this. I thought I was firing HE rounds at the VK3601. I'm trying to cheap out and fire HE instead of high explosive anti-tank, and all that I'm really achieving is bouncing an armor-piercing round and missing the subsequent shell. And that actually tilted me. And you're going to see that I'm probably going to make a pretty big mistake here. Well, I might get a shot into the Thunderbolt. Great, you dealt 335 damage. Stritzfang tracks me. Artillery follows it up with another tracking shot for 223 and... Yeah, you gotta love tier 6 self-propelled guns, right, boys and girls? This is an easy tank to be able to hit, and its tracks will, yeah, ruin your games. But we're up to 3,200 combined in 3.5 minutes. More gameplay to come. Alright, next up we're playing on Serene Coast. When I'm playing on this map, there's probably a few things that I could do in this battle. Number one would be to make my way over here, and I could go and sit in one of these bushes and then maybe be able to get a little bit of vision. But I don't really trust my team to be able to snipe for my spots when I'm playing at tier 6. I usually do that in my higher tiered light tanks. Instead, what I want to do is take the VK2801 along the warpath straight towards the enemy team, where I can try and make use of the 10 degrees of gun depression this tank has. Also, you noticed? I fixed the high explosive rounds, at least eventually, to be on my 1 key. And I thoroughly recommend that you all do too, if you want to play this vehicle, at least muscle memory from 7 years ago, when this vehicle used to be outrageous, right? Alright, so AMX 12T, T52 behind me. What's the plan? Well, let's go and give him a dub. Yoink! Goodbye, little French light tank. German superiority here. And just like that, we're up a kill and 300 damage. It is where this tank is fun. It's really good for hunting lights. But also, is it good for hunting mediums with low amounts of armor as well? Yeah, goodbye to half your hit points. Nice trades, M4A1. But he's hitting the weak point on top of my tank. But we're gonna give him a little bit of another clunk as well. And just like that, a whole tier 6 auto-loading premium medium tank dealt with. This vehicle trades. Boys and girls, it absolutely trades. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have that many hit points to be able to trade, but if you can play a little bit more intelligently, then all the power to you if you can be able to sneak in some extra shells. I like to play this thing aggressive. I like to try and flank my opponents. I love to use the mobility. And right now we're zooming out to see if the M4A3 E8 is going to be looking at the 40 TP. And there we go. We can see that his turret is turned. So I'm going to come around the corner, put around into the side of his tank, and unfortunately for me, the Nashorn's going to hit me. But you know what? I don't think my rate of fire is really that much worse than Nashorn. So if I hear him fire, as I just did, clap. 379 damage dealt with an HE round on this tank. Let's go. This thing is absolutely meaty. Have to admit, having this derp back, this is just such a nice gift from Wargaming. I have to admit, like, I said that twice in 30 seconds, but really these well-deserved rewards, oh, they're just so wonderful as a dedicated long-term World of Tanks player. And this one, unlike arguably the Super Chaffee, it is literally the VK2801 as it used to be, as far as I can tell, and boy does it feel good. Unless you're missing the T-37 and allowing what used to be effectively the Chaffee. This is quite an interesting engagement. This is what the VK used to be at Tier 5 versus what the Chaffee used to be, which is now at Tier 6, right? And there's one for the ages. The VK2801 finishing off the old Chaffee, picking up its 5th kill in 3 minutes and 1,700 damage dealt again. Yeah, you can see this thing's got some impact. If you're a cheeky boy and you want to get stuck in, go for it. Alright, so far you've seen the vehicle playing against Tier 6 tanks. At least we haven't been playing against Tier 5s or Tier 4s. Is it even possible for Tier 6s to play against Tier 4s these days? I don't even know. And I didn't actually manage to meet any Tier 8 vehicles in this play session. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit tricky. But at least you can really deal with any kind of light tank irrelevant of what it is and then try and play as a scout. You're probably not going to be doing fat amounts of damage to the higher tier heavies on the enemy team unless you sneak up behind them and be able to get some high explosive anti-tank rounds into them. To be fair, back in the day, I am starting to realize why I have so much experience in this tank. And that's because the VK isn't really the same as what it used to be, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It used to have, I'm never going to get bored of doing 353 damage to another T-37. And we clapped the AMX 12T for 454 at the start. How quickly does this thing rock the damage? It really does. I'm looking forward to the monstrous VK wars when this vehicle is first released on the server. I digress. As I was saying, I'm remembering why this vehicle, I have so much experience in it, and that's because back in the day, the high explosive anti-tank rounds on this vehicle and on all of the derps were way better than they are now. 50% better. Not via damage, but by penetration. You could get 150 millimeters of penetration on your high explosive anti-tank rounds on this vehicle, still having 350 alpha damage. That was amazing on this tank. Can I cheek in an HE shell? Not really. Probably should have gone with the high explosive anti-tank, but I didn't think I was going to pen the 4,000 credits. And even though I have millions of them now, gosh darn it, I still don't feel right about just whiffing those rounds for no purpose against a Soviet heavy. Finish the story, QB. Stop being so flippant. Okay, so the derp guns, including on this one, had 150 millimeters of penetration. And so the reason why I managed to get 3,200 experience in this vehicle was because I was playing against E100s, and I figured out if I snuck up right behind the E100 and I fired into the rear of that tank, that you could actually manage to penetrate them. And yeah, to say that World of Tanks players back in the day were worse than they are now would be a bit of an understatement. Yeah, you've probably seen some tier 10 players even now playing very poorly, right? Well, this is back in 2012 or 2013 and people played absolutely horrendously. A lot more laptops, a lot worse connections, physics and everything messed up in the game. Heavy tanks felt as if they were all slow. Nobody really had crazy crew skills which allowed heavy tanks to scale. Light tanks were fast and you could pretty much out-traverse. And yeah, heavy tanks couldn't even use their repair kit multiple times in a battle. One use. And then you could manage to just run rings around them, which was kind of fun when you're playing a light tank, right? And that is how I managed to get an insane amount of experience on this vehicle. And still to this day, I haven't managed to get above it, although clearly it was a broken tank. And when it was at tier 5, it's just as good as it is currently in tier 6. And remember, the way that the experience coefficient in World of Tanks works is that every tier that the enemy tank is higher, you get 10% extra experience. So, if you shoot at a tier 10 tank and you're in a tier 5 tank, I presume that I was actually getting 50% extra experience for every shot that I put into the enemy E100. And when you're doing 350 damage, yeah, it kind of stacks up. Oh, I reminisce. I may have to try and dig out some replays of the VK2801 or something, if I can even find them. Maybe I could try and find that one. I can't promise that I'll be able to do that. It's probably on some ancient hardware now buried in my attic. And that's something that I really don't have the will or the drive to be able to go and delve into at this time of year, let alone when I'm also releasing YouTube videos every day. So that's it, the VK2801 back in the day. That was why it was ridiculously OP. But as you can see now, it's kind of back with the 105mm. I genuinely think this is the best well-deserved reward that Wargaming have released. For a little bit of fun, to reminisce, and also, I genuinely think that this vehicle is fairly competitive. I think one of the reasons why Wargaming removed the 105mm from the VK2801, unless it didn't fit their narrative for the line, was because it was a fairly good and scarily fun tank to be able to play. I like clapping higher tier autoloaders, self-propelled guns. Gosh, that would be the end of World of Tanks, right? If we had auto-loading self-propelled. Oh, we already do. It's called the Batch at 15558. Wake up, QuickyBaby. It's not 2013 anymore. Gosh, remember that thing back then, though. This tank always puts me down a trip down memory lane. I can't wait to look forward to streaming this tank. And there we have it. The VK2801 is back. It only took, like, Wargaming, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years to be able to give this tank the gun that it used to have. But I'll take it any day of the week. Now that it's a reward vehicle, it's even better because you're going to be making some extra crew training. And now that it's a reward vehicle, you can keep your crew in more painful tanks higher up the tech tree, like the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, and then be able to throw them in this vehicle for a little bit of derpy fun. It's good that the VK2801 is back, and thank you very much, Wargaming, for what you call a well-deserved reward, because, yeah, sometimes when you're playing World of Tanks, it does feel like it's eternal suffering, and this does make it a little bit sweeter. So our first game on Fisherman's Bay was a defeat. Even though we finished top on experience of our team, I guess I shouldn't have got tracked by that M44 that was sitting at the back of the map, and there was a Dickomax on the enemy team who actually smashed my team. I'm still very happy with the 3,200, 3,300 combined that we had. In the next game, we finished top on damage, top on experience, even though we were the only one who died. I like to burn brightly when I play this tank, but the stars that burn brightest live the less amount of time. They burn out the fastest. Way to ruin something that sounded at least remotely intelligent for once in your life that you said, Will. Okay, so the VK2801 in the third matchup. We actually ended up second on damage in this tier 7 game on a map which usually you'd only think the heavy tanks were doing well in, and 1,155 base experience was enough to get us an ace tanker. Oh, that won't be for very long though. Very soon you're probably going to have to get probably about 1,500 to be able to get an ace tanker in this. So if you want to get an ace early in this vehicle, I'd recommend you do it on the day that it's released. And a patrol duty as well for all of that spotting. Next, as you can see, this vehicle doesn't really seem to be making premium credits. Although it looks like What Replays might be making a mistake, because as we can see here for our ace tanker on Runeberg, we actually made 46,000. Is that a premium income? That kind of sounds just like a regular game for a tier 6, right? I think if we had dealt 4,300 combined in a tier 6 a premium tank, I think we would have made a good chunk more than that. So all in all, the VK2801 with the 105mm, do I think that this is going to be the next best reward vehicle? No. But I do, at least maybe this is me being a little bit biased considering I used to love this vehicle back in the day, think that it's actually one of the best ones that Wargaming have given us. Unlike a tank like the Super Hellcat, doesn't have so many weaknesses in areas that you really wouldn't want the vehicle to have, like penetration on a tank destroyer. But this tank still has the decent view range, it's got enough armor and enough alpha to really be able to surprise its opponents. And if you set it up, in my opinion, correctly with Equipment 2.0, with vents, coated optics, and the concealment on the move, low noise exhaust system, whatever it's called, then this thing, at least for me, is a real winner. And if you want to get your hands on this, then simply log into the game when the well-deserved reward is released. And if you've been playing for, I guess, about 3 or 4 years, then you're going to get this. And if you don't panic, if you haven't been playing that long and you really like the look of this tank, because you managed to get all of the well-deserved rewards in the future as well. So just keep playing for the next few years, and then you too will be able to get your hands on this tank. And if, after seeing this tank is back in the game, all of you World of Tanks veterans out there are itching to be able to get back onto the battlefield, then I have an affiliate link down below where you can reactivate your account and get back onto the battlefield. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this full tank review on the VK2801 with 105mm. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And has this vehicle satisfied all of your memories of the VK2801? Or do you wish that Wargaming had given it 150mm of high explosive anti-tank rounds? Yeah, probably shouldn't admit that if if you wanted it, right? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.